Whether you're a fan of Ted Cruz or not, what he and several Senate Republicans said about our national debt is incontrovertible.
Over the past 2 decades, Congress has been bankrupting our nation. You go back to the year 2000, our national debt was $5 trillion. That sounds like a wildly different world than where we are today, because it was a wildly different world. Think about that for a moment. 42 presidents over the course of more than 2 centuries had built up a total debt of $5 trillion. Then a Republican came into office, George W. Bush. And over the next 8 years, under a Republican president, our national debt went from $5 trillion to $10 trillion. We doubled the national debt in just 8 years. Then a Democrat came into office, Barack Obama. And over the next 8 years, the national debt doubled yet again, going from $10 trillion to $20 trillion. Now pause and reflect on that. 42 presidents over 2 centuries build $5 trillion in debt. 2 presidents, one Republican and one Democrat, over just 16 years, quadrupled our national debt. And now over the last 6 years, again with a Republican president and a Democrat president, we've seen national debt grow from $20 trillion to $31.5 trillion. This is unsustainable. The American people at home, if you're fed up with inflation, if you're fed up with the cost of food skyrocketing, with the cost of electricity, of rent, of lumber, of mortgages, of gasoline, of cars, of everything you buy, it's because politicians in Washington cannot stop spending money that we don't have.
Very, very painful words spoken by the senator from the great state of Texas. We have had 4 presidents since the year 2000. It's been almost 23 years since 2000. We're in the 23rd year now. And both Democrats and Republicans are complicit in our national debt. Conservatives love to talk about how we are the party of fiscal responsibility, but no. At the federal level, they do the same thing. We expect the Democrats to spend, but at that level, we're doing the exact same thing. We've had the White House, we've had the Senate, we've had the House. We've had a trifecta at the federal level. And even during times of broken government, it's the same thing. Bush added to the debt. Obama added to the debt. Trump added to the debt. Biden added to the debt. And still is. He's not even done yet. So it doesn't matter who's in the White House. The debt continues to grow. Now, for those of you that don't know, around 60% of our budget at the federal level is called entitlement spending. It's mandatory spending. It's money that's basically already spent. It's, a lot of it's spent on social programs such as Social Security, Medicaid, aid to families and stuff like that. It's money already spent. And then, of course, we have around, I think, 8% or so that's interest on the debt. And the United States of America has never defaulted on our debt, so we have to pay our debt. Interest on the debt, rather. Now, what Ted Cruz pointed out was just startling to me, that in the year 2000, when good old W took office, our nation was around $5 trillion in debt. And within not even 23 full years, it's been 23 years, but not 23 full years, but let's just say it's been 23 years for the sake of arguing. In 23 years, our debt has multiplied 6-fold. And we're talking about from $5 trillion to $31.5 trillion. That is incredible to me. That is incredible. And not many of us talk about that. Not many Americans are concerned about that. We're complaining about inflation. because it's becoming to be unbearable for a lot of people. And it is bad. Housing prices are through the roof. Food prices are through the roof. All types of commodities, gasoline. There are thousands of products that have petroleum in them, and there are several fuels that we use that are derived of fossil fuels like oil. Jet fuel that the airplanes use comes from oil. Diesel fuel, which goes in our trucks, run from oil in our tractors. And we wonder why our food prices are skyrocketing. Diesel is high as hell right now for those of y'all that drive trucks or know anybody who drive trucks. And I don't think that the Democrat Party as a whole cares. I don't think the Republican Party as a whole cares. The American people care. But anywho, I've identified several major expenditures that our federal government has spent trillions of dollars on since the year 2000. And the unfortunate thing is that all of these things that have happened, we had the ability to do something about or either not do at all. Like, in other words, these are man-made disasters. The Iraq and Afghan war, the Great Recession, the bailouts that ensued from the housing crisis back in '08 and '09. All the money we gave to GM and Freddie Mac and all these banks that were failing because they were too big to fail. And we're supposed to be a capitalistic free market society. Those were not capitalistic free market decisions that was made by our federal government. And keep in mind that the normal expenditures that our government was used to making, they didn't stop spending the money, even though tax revenue was down. On Main Street, when people like me and you don't have the money to pay for certain things, we just don't buy it at that time. Or we'll take out a loan. Or we'll use our credit cards if they're not already maxed out. But the federal government is not supposed to be maxing out our debt like this. All the economic stimulus packages. Then, of course, we had the big bad COVID. The COVID stimuluses. They shut the economy down. So many sectors of the economy, at least. If you weren't deemed essential, you couldn't go to work. Now, of course, in certain states like my home state of Georgia, down to our south in Florida, a lot of the red states, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, a lot of our states didn't lock down for very long. We locked down briefly and opened right back up because it just wasn't working. And we saw the writing on the wall. And the Democrats gave us hell about it, but look who has egg on their face now. And one of the states that locked down very, very harshly was the state of Michigan. And Michigan is pretty much a blue state at this point, led by a tyrannical governor, Gretchen Whitmer. And they had a higher death rate than several states that are more populated than them. So the lockdowns weren't the solution. So yeah, they told us we needed to go bomb Afghanistan, and Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction after the whole 9/11 incident. Rest in peace to everybody who died during 9/11. But there's a whole lot of unanswered questions surrounding 9/11. If you know, you know. All I have to say about 9/11 is why the hell did Building 7 come down and Building 7 wasn't struck by anything? But that's another conversation for another day. So I digress. We spent over 20 years in Afghanistan. And the opioid use has skyrocketed since then, but I'll leave that alone as well. Then we had the Great Recession. It's just been so many things that we, the people, were not responsible for. And the government screwed us every time. Every single time. People have died. We've lost 1 million plus people to COVID. And God knows how many more are going to succumb to the jab. But that's another conversation for another video as well. So, our government is not on our side. At least at the federal level. The state level is a little bit cleaner. It's still dirt at the state level too. There's corruption in every big city. There's corruption in every state capital because big businesses have access to our politicians. That's just what it is. And they buy them and they sell them like a prostitute. But that's enough of me ranting. I just wanted to point that out, that Ted Cruz brought up a very, very valid observation, a very, very relevant observation, rather. And over the past 23 years, we have multiplied our debt sixfold, sixfold. And we wonder why the dollar is just collapsing in value. My dad told me when he was a kid, and he's in his 60s now, I'm in my 30s, he could take a dollar bill and buy a Coca-Cola, a movie ticket, and a bag of popcorn for $1. This was back in the 70s. Well, probably the mid to late 60s, because he was a teenager in the 70s. Maybe the 70s as well. But the US dollar has lost its value 13 times over since the 1900s. That's how incredibly irresponsible our federal government has been with printing money that we don't have. We know the Federal Reserve is a corrupt institution. That's another conversation for another video as well. But I just wanted to discuss that briefly because it was just fascinating to me when I was listening to it at work earlier. Thanks for watching, you guys. Peace and blessings.